So today we will start with the WVD setup. We'll talk about how we can implement the WVD. What are the things that are needed, right? How do we set up the environment? So those things we'll be discussing today. Okay. So I have power cut. Have less charging. I hope it will be fine for next 1 hour. Let's see. Okay. So so WVD, right? So Windows Virtual Desktop, right? So nowadays, I mean, most of the IT companies are providing the Windows 10 as a virtual machine so that users can access securely, right, their work, right? So basically, what we need is, right, we either you have on-prem environment or Azure environment, right, existing setup. We need a on-premises or on Azure, wherever it is, right? You need to have a domain controller in place because it has to perform the authentication, Active Directory. So where your users and everybody is available there, right? All the user accounts information is available. Now we have the cloud, right? You should have active subscription, active Azure subscription. Okay. Then what you need is you should be a global administrator in Azure AD, and you need to create a WVD setup here. In the WVD setup, you can create as many VMs as you want. That you want like 2 VMs or 3 VMs, right? So and you can specify, you will have an option how many machines you wanted to spin up, and how many users can access concurrently, 10 users or 15 users, right? So these servers will load balance the um, sessions automatically. Okay, when a user will connect to this, right, maybe next time when he log in, he may connect to this, but their user profiles has to be, you know, common, right? Whatever you're saving, you should save in your C volume users directory, right? C documents, users and user ID and documents, right? So you store whatever you want to store, you have to store it here so that whichever the machine you log in, right, your profile will be loaded. So this will be loaded with the help of a component called FS logic. Okay. So FS logic you have to set up in a storage account. There should be one storage account you have to create. And there's a big process that we have to integrate this FS logic so that whenever a user logged in, so he will not see that, okay, he connected to the new VM in the backend, new laptop or new desktop in the backend. So everything will be loaded with the help of FS logic. Okay. So how this happens and how the connectivity works, we'll talk about it. Okay. So along with this desktop session, right? This is what we are giving is desktop sessions. Okay, or session desktops. We are giving desktop sessions to the users remotely, right? They should be able to connect to these sessions remotely. We call session desktop. Along with this, if you wanted to provision applications, okay, so you have MS Office and all, right? So those will be automatically installed in these laptops. I mean these session desktops. You just need to apply the licenses for them. Okay. So now, other than this Microsoft applications, you wanted to have other applications. Um, let's say VLC player. Just taking an example, maybe some HR application, right? So what you need to do is you need to install those applications in each region first. Okay. Then once you install it, you in the WVD you have an option called application groups. So whatever the applications you installed here, they will be visible under the applications here. You need to create a group for them and assign the access to the users. So this is the one type of setup. Okay, this is like one setup you have in Azure. Okay, so like you create a server and you give access, right? So same way, you this is one kind of setup you have in Azure subscription. WVD is a service like a virtual machine, like a storage account, backup. This is also one of the service that Microsoft is offering. What they do is they will give you an action, access to provision the environment, right? So you don't need to worry how they load balance, okay? And you don't need to worry who managing in the backend, right? You get a session desktop. Okay, there will be a URL. You'll be able to, your users will be able to access the URL, right? When they access it, they'll be able to log in and get the sessions, right? So once they log into the session, they'll not feel like it's a new session. They'll feel like, same. They get access to all applications, etc. So, any questions?
Um, yeah. So where do you store these? I mean, the user ID documents data.
Right.
Let's say um, I don't know how many you've
Each
just got a VM
machine,
to
each
those 10,
machine, right?
15.
When you log into the machine, you'll have a C volume, right? Within the C
Mm,
volume, you have a users, and within the users folder, you'll have your, let's say you are logging in, right? You'll have user
right.
ID,
Yeah.
and you'll have
Right.
documents, you have pictures, you have all the basic things, right? So
Mm-hmm.
should not store it in a D volume or a E volume or F volume because
Right.
that is local to the disk. But these profiles, the user profile can be loaded to all the machines with the help of this FS logic service, right? If you wanted to share the data, if you wanted to use the same data, better to store in this. That's a recommendation. If you store it in the, let's say you logged into this, you stored into one of the D volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, or E volume. So when you go for a next session, when you go for this one, it will not load the D volume here.
That'll be into your disk, the VM's disk,
Yeah, that is, yeah, related to the
data
disk,
disk.
right? So that's why.
Right.
So
So,
whatever
but
you
you,
store here, that will be loaded with the help of first logic.
right, but you can't mandate that, right? I mean, see, he'll be the user, right? So he might as well save his document to D drive, right, or anywhere else.
Correct, correct.
So
I agree what you're saying,
then,
but we should educate the users.
okay, so everything they should be putting into user ID documents,
Yeah, document. See, whatever you see, any folder after the user ID, right? That is your
right?
profile. Okay, you can store it in that. Clear?
Okay, and let's say if the user changes his desktop, changes his fonts, where are those settings stored?
So everything will be loaded from his user profiles.
User profile. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Okay. So how it happens? You have your user account created here in the AD. Okay, whether this AD server running in Azure and different VNet as an infrastructure VM, that is different. But end of the day, AD as a component where your users details are exist, user ID, passwords, and everything, right? You're controlling the
Hmm.
environment with AD. So these users has to synchronize to Azure Ready. Okay, okay, that's a one step. You have to create a users here. They have to synchronize to Azure Ready. Once you synchronized, okay, these users will be able to reflect in the WVD groups. You can, let's say there are like 10 users who need to have access to a specific application. Maybe out of 1,000 users, only 500 users need a session desktop access. You can create a group here, okay, add users to the group. That group will be synchronized to Azure AD, and the same group will be visible in the WVD. So when you are giving session desktop access, instead of giving access to users, you can give access to the entire group, so that all the people who are in the group get access to this WVD machines, session desktops.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So see, for WVD to read this users in Azure AD, so what we need to do is we need to give access to this Azure AD. So we need to give a WVD access to read the data from Azure AD. That is one thing. And there is something called RDS tenant because these WVD is managed by remote desktop services, RDS, right? So those RDS service, we have to create a tenant. There is something called RDS tenant. We should create. First step is to give access to Azure AD. Second step is to create a tenant for RDS and provide required access. Then after that, once this entire setup is done, they should be able to see. First, what we'll do is we will create a domain controller. We'll create a one VM in Azure. We'll configure domain controller, and whatever the domain you are giving is internal, right? The same users can synchronize here, but when they try to access from the internet, they should be able to identify. So I have a domain purchased long ago. I'll check that from GoDaddy. Okay, so I'm going to do a custom domain verification with this so that my users can use my domain name to log in, right? Even they are in Azure or on-prem. Okay, this is the setup that we are going to do now. Let me first create a VM and configure the enable domain controller. Once we enable domain controller, we'll install the Azure Ready Connect. Once we install the Azure Ready Connect, we'll start synchronizing use to Azure Ready, right? So by that time, I think the session will be ended. In the next session, we'll be able to configure the remaining steps where we are going to integrate Azure AD and WVD and creating a WVD and giving access to the users. Okay, clear?
What is domain controller?
I'm sorry.
What is domain controller?
Domain controller is where your Active Directory databases exist. All user accounts and groups will be created in the AD first. Whenever a new employee joined, the employee details will be stored in the AD. It performs the authentication authorization. Clear?
Right. So that is AD, right? Active Directory.
Yes, yes. The server which holds the AD database called domain controller.
Okay. It's the server which is called domain controller. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
And what is ADDS? Azure Active Directory Domain Services.
See, you don't have this AD, let's say, on-prem environment. You wanted to use only Azure AD, right? But for this setup, we need a domain controller for sure, right? Because to manage the authentication, etc. So Microsoft introduced Azure AD Domain Services, AADDS, Azure Active Directory Domain Services. This is the feature that Microsoft introduced extension to your Azure AD. Let's say you have a domain called Contoso dot on Microsoft.com, right? Azure AD will have the name ending with the suffix dot on Microsoft.com, right? So you're going to create a domain controller in Azure, right? The domain controller is being managed by Microsoft. Okay. You don't have any control to this. So what you need to do is you need to integrate when you are enabling Azure domain services, you will be asked to specify the VNet. Okay. And there will be a subnet created. So when when you enable this, once a Azure domain service enable, this will be part of this VNet, right? Whenever you are creating a new VM, you have to create a VM in this in a different subnet, and you will be able to join the server to this domain. So whatever the users you are creating in Azure AD, they will be visible in Azure AD domain services. Whatever you are creating in Azure AD domain services, you'll be able to see them in Azure AD. So no need to synchronize users from with the help of Azure AD Connect because both are in Azure and they will be able to see the users here and there. Okay. So only the difference is, Azure AD domain services do not have the same capabilities of native AD because it has a group policies and Kerberos authentication, LDAP, various features you have in AD. So in Azure AD, we don't have it. That's why they introduced Azure AD domain services. Even that also have a lot of limitations. And this product is, with my experience, I would say, this is not being so successful so far. And
Hmm.
the everything whatever you see is like too many bugs or etc. So people
Okay.
are adapted this legacy or AD technology, so because their applications everything is built and developed with the help of AD. Okay, so they try to use this. I mean, that is what even I recommend. Okay, the people
Okay.
who wanted to have only cloud platform, they can just go with the Azure AD domain services and Azure AD integration. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. Sure.
So let me see if I can get a new account. So I'm trying to get a new subscription so that our lab subscription will not be disabled, right? So we will implement something, and by the time we test it, so it will be disabled. So that's why I'm trying to get new subscription.
Kamlakar, you create these new subscriptions, right? The
Mm.
subscriptions mainly for the billing. So where exactly you give the billing information?
So
One,
since it is usually right, if it is a pay as you go subscription, you will be specifying
yeah.
your credit card, everything.
uh,
So, but
is it, is it
since
while
it
we
is a
sign up, we get this information
yeah, while sign up, we'll
to
provide that information, credit card information. Since it is a pass, Azure pass, so it will not ask me.
uh,
Yeah. Oh, so in this page, usually it will ask for the credit card if it is a pay as you go subscription.
okay.
So I got the subscription active now. So one thing I want to tell you guys, just in case if the battery is low, if it is shut down, no worries. I will have this setup ready. Okay, just I will continue this, but in case if it is get shut down, so please bear with me. Okay.
Okay.
So let's talk few things about Azure AD. Okay, while the VM is getting created. So this is the directory that gets created. Okay, and this is my tenant or domain name. By default, we get it. Okay, I'm the global administrator. If I wanted to add anybody else, I can add as a global administrator. By default, every user who have access to subscription will be a user in the Azure AD. Okay, Azure AD permissions are different and the Azure subscription permissions are different. Though you are a owner in the subscription level, you will be a user in the Azure AD, right? Even though you are Azure global administrator in the Azure AD, if you are not having access to subscription, you cannot create any resources. So those Azure subscription permissions are different. and Azure Ready permissions are different. Okay, so whatever the user accounts you're creating, so they will be first created here. So this is the account, it is created automatically. If I wanted to add you guys to the subscription, first the user account will be created here, then you will get access to the Azure subscription. Okay, so these are about the users. We'll spend some more time in understanding these when we are talking about Azure AD. Okay, so there are different types of users. One is like cloud users, where the users are created directly here as a new user option here. Okay, there are users who synchronize from on-prem AD. This the one which we are trying to test it today, right? So they'll be this setting will change to directly sync to yes if you're synchronizing from on-prem AD to Azure AD. Okay, one is cloud user and synced user from on-prem. The other one is a guest user. I used to add you guys to my subscription to get access to Azure resources, right? So that is called guest user, right? You can use your personal email IDs to access Azure resources. That is called guest users. Okay. So in this
So
scenario,
somewhere
mhm,
in this scenario, I mean, first, is it mandatory that we need to have AD access and then the subscription access?
yeah. So since I created this, I have got access to Azure AD as a global administrator. If I want you to manage only Azure resources like VMs, etc., I can directly give access in a subscription level. I don't want you to be a global administrator in Azure AD. Okay, but if you wanted to be part of Azure subscription, first your account has to be exist in Azure AD as a user. Okay, so let me do this quickly. I'll go to subscription. I'll go here. I'll go to access control, add a role assignment. I'm going to add my ID. Okay, this is the one. Save this. Okay, then I'll go to Azure AD and I'll go to users. You will see my user account is invited as a guest. Okay, if I look at the assigned roles, I'm just a user. Okay, I don't have any permissions, right? You see, guest user. User type is guest, right? So though I'm owner in a subscription, but here in Azure AD, I'm just a guest user or a user. Okay, if I wanted to assign a role, I just come to assign roles and provide a global administrator roles or whatever the role I need. Clear? Or is it clear?
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Understood.
Okay. Even groups also, you can create groups here in the cloud groups or whatever the groups you are synchronizing, so you can see them here. Okay. So if I, as I mentioned, right, so this is the domain that you have. So if you create an user account, what happens is the user account is going to create with this username or UPN. Let's say test user, right? So I'm going to say test hyphen AAD. Okay. So password we can give anything or it will automatically generate. So I can give any group, any role. Right now I want to add a global administrator. Okay. And usage location I can say India. I can provide job title, department, everything. Whatever you see the properties, almost same properties you can see here in Azure AD as well. Show me the password, copy this. Okay. Create a user account. So now you see this user account is a member. Okay. And it is not synced. And here this one is a guest and we sent an invitation. Okay, we sent an invitation, user is created with that method. Okay, so now if I give this user ID to my users, will they feel happy? Because it's a very big name, right? So we need to verify our own domain with this. So if I go to this custom domain option, Okay, there is something called custom domain. We can add our own domain name. So I have purchased a domain from GoDaddy. You see here, right? This is my domain name. Um, it expires next year. Right, I just need to add this. This is my domain. Click on add a domain. So once I add a domain, I have to verify it, right? So I have to go to GoDaddy and create these records. So I'm into the GoDaddy and go to DNS, DNS settings. So, so this is where we'll add our records. Okay. So I can go to this, add a TXT record, click on add
What option was that?
TXT.
No. So you were searching for this option, right? So it's under
Yeah, yeah.
DNS management. Okay.
Manage DNS. It
Okay.
is manage DNS option. Yeah. This is the value and it should be 1 hour, right? As per this. Yeah. TTL is 1 hour. And adding another one, MX record, mail exchange. Okay, and destination is this. Okay, these all are updated. Sometimes you have to wait for 24 hours to get this updated, but nowadays I see it's very quick. Let me go here, click on verify now. It's going to verify it's failed. So there could be various reasons. This domain has been previously configured to use this using existing Azure AD verify the domain. Oh my god, it's been used. Okay, so let
So
me
I
do one
guess
thing.
you'll have to delete the earlier records.
Right, that's what I'm seeing. Just give me a few minutes. I'm just checking few things here. This is very big topic actually. So I have another directory. So I think this is where it is verified. So you see here, right? It is a primary domain set. So if I go to custom domain names, it is here on this one. This one. So first I have to make this a previous one as a primary. Then I have to go back to this and delete this. So I cannot simply delete because there are like few resources exist it seems. So if I go to this right users, there are user accounts created with this username. If I expand this, you see right, there's one user account created here and a few more here, right? So I can clean up from there itself, I believe. So let me go here again, click here, delete, giving me all. So before we delete any domain, right? So we have to clean up the resources with respect to that. Okay, now it is successful. Okay, you can see right. Now what I can do is I can create a user accounts directly with this name. If I click on new user, click on this. So let's say Kamalakar, right? Kamalakar. Okay, I can choose the password. Okay, so this is all set up now. Okay, so and even our server is created. What I will do is I will install the domain controller here. Okay, with the same domain name that I've used in Azure Ready. Okay, so let me connect to the server and RDP.
This is what machine, Kamal?
This is the domain controller I'm going to create. It is in Azure. I don't have on-prem, so I'm creating the domain
Okay,
controller in
so
Azure itself.
we are assuming this to be on-prem, right?
Yeah, it can be on-prem, it can be Azure also. Sometimes some
Okay.
customers have the AD and Azure itself. But yeah, let us assume this is an on-prem. Okay, let us assume that.
On-prem.
Yeah. So to enable domain controller, we need to go to add rules and features and click next. We need to select remote based, role based or feature based installation. Here we are selecting our server. There can be multiple servers in the network, but we are having only one. So that's why you're able to see only one server here. So this is where you have to select the domain services, Active Directory domain services. Click next and install. Okay, so the installation is completed. The next step is to promote this server as a domain controller. We can just go to this notification lead and click on promote this server as a domain controller. So we are going to add a new forest. This is a new setup, right? The domain name is going to be the same one which I've used here. Let's say this is our domain name. Okay. So let me give this name. Okay, click next. So this is where we have to provide a password. So this will be used when you want to restore the directory services. Um, you can see the progress in the top. There are multiple warnings because we are not meeting the best practices of a domain controller. There should be a static IP and a lot of things. So since it is testing, so we can ignore these. So it requires a reboot. So it's going to perform the reboot of the server automatically. You see it is disconnected.
Hello.
Yeah, Rakesh.
Okay. I thought you were speaking mute.
Yeah. I'm setting up the environment. So domain controller, I mean, Activate domain services are installed. It took a reboot. So now we are trying to log in after the reboot. So once we logged in, so we should be able to create a groups and users for testing. Probably in the next session, we'll install the Azure AD Connect and proceed with the WVD setup.
Okay.
So you can go to the tools and there is something called Active Directory users and computers. Click on that and you can maximize this. Go to view, select advanced features, expand this. You will see all users, built-in users here. They are built-in users by default created. If you wanted to create any users, you can just create from here itself. So whenever you join any organization, your IT team will create a user account for you. So what we'll do, we'll create a new organization unit, OU. Okay, so this is, let's say, WVD users OU. Okay, so here I'm going to create a new user account. Let's say the so I'm going to say the right. So click next. Same password I'm giving. One simple at 123. So once we sync users to Azure Ready, right? Adi can use his credentials, these credentials to log into Azure portal or anything. Okay, the same way he log into his organization, right? So he can use the same use these credentials to log in. Rakesh. Okay, next. Finish this. Okay, two users accounts created. I can create a group if needed. Security group on-prem group universal. Can add your use, you both of you there, and Rakesh. Okay, so we have the setup ready. So I'll what I'll do is let me go to login here. First, let me disable this local server. All right, I think in the next session we'll set up this Azure Ready Connect and we'll proceed with the remaining testing. Okay, clear?
Okay.
Sure.
All right.
So,
Nice.
I mean,
Yeah.
the setup that you did, Kamal, right? So
Mhm.
that is how will be there on-prem. I mean, on a
Right,
usual on-prem, right? So you'll
right.
have
That's
this
right. Correct.
Active Directory domain controller, and you'll have these users and security groups all
Yes,
set up
yes,
there, right?
yes. You're
By
right.
itself,
Yeah.
right? And then using AD Connect is what I mean, how we sync with Azure Active, Directory.
Yes, you're right. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So once we synchronize, we'll see the user accounts present or replicated to Azure AD. So we can give
Hmm.
access to Azure AD applications or Azure subscriptions, so wherever is needed, right? So that's a use case of um, Azure AD Connect. Okay,
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, sure.
All right then, let's connect tomorrow. All right. Thank you guys.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, guys.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.